Welcome back to Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast covering the Las Vegas Raiders. Scott Gulbransen with you. My partner, Moe Moton, will be back with us here in just a few. But joining us to start off the show, of course, is our good friend, our NFL insider here at Odyssey. That is Brian Baldinger. Baldy is also seen all the time on the NFL Network. Everybody loves it. And by the way, the Baldy breakdowns on X.com, you can't miss those, so you got to follow him on X.com at Baldy NFL. All right, my man, listen, let's jump in. It's a tough time for Raider Nation right now. You look at what's going on with this team. They sit there at 3-4, and you think, well, geez, they're in second place in the AFC West, but everyone knows that this team is in trouble. I'm just dumbstruck by this, Baldy. You have $104 million invested in your offense. You brought in a new quarterback. Josh McDaniels really wanted to get his guys in there. They brought him in, and they're almost last in every category on offense. They can't score. 9 of the last 10 games can't score 20 points. And we've seen, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo go out again with injury. We talked with you back in the summer about that.
Yeah.
When you look at this whole package on offense, and we'll get to defense in a minute, but when you look at this whole situation on offense, what do you see from the tape when you watch this team and what they're not doing? What's going on in your mind?
Well, there's no explosion to the offense. Okay, so none. They didn't have one explosive play against Chicago. That's not the 85 Bears that they were playing against. There's a rookie corner out there. I mean, there's a lot of inexperience. Jalen Johnson looked like, in that second half he owned Devontae Adams. I mean, it just shouldn't happen. But the quarterback play was pathetic last week. I mean, I'm sure Brian Hoyer's a nice guy. He's had some good days in this league. But that was not a good performance. Like, that was just that interception to Jalen Johnson. The first one was horrible. Like, you can't inflate the ball with helium and float it out there to Devontae and expect that ball not to do what happened. But then you go, okay, well, Josh Jacobs led the league in rushing last year. What's going on? I mean, they had 2 good runs the whole afternoon. Not that they ran it all that many times. But they had 2, and it was the first 2 plays of the third quarter, and that was it. A 7-yard run, 11-yard run, and other than that, like, they couldn't get, a yardstick. So, that's a problem. Hunter Renfrow has been a good player in this league. He's invisible. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, it looks awful. Last week, there's been some poor performances. Last week was the worst for me to watch it because I felt like the team was flat. It didn't, Chicago was a very winnable game to get to get that, important win, to get a third win in a row. It was important. And it was set up there to do it. And they played their worst game, I thought, of the year. That's always falls on the coach. I don't care who it is. If it was Vince Lombardi, it falls on the coach. Like, that was a poor performance. And every coach, before they say anything to the team, has to look at themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's where we look at the situation, Baldy, and you say to yourself, and I'm not a guy out here calling for coaches to get fired. I just don't do that. That's not what I do. But I will talk about the facts here. And if you look at what you talked about, this loss and how the team came out flat after the game, Coach Josh McDaniels said no, he thought the team was prepared. Well, to me, that shows a disconnect. And if you don't know what's going on, if you don't feel that as the head coach, that your players aren't ready or they come out. Now, sometimes they just come out flat. I get that. That happens. But you look at that, you look at blowing 5 double digits last year to set an NFL record. You look at the loss to Jeff Saturday, who's a great guy, yes, but he wasn't an NFL coach. Mm-hmm. The Baker Mayfield game, and then you look at the obviously the Bears loss. This is 24 games in, and I think that what I've said is that I don't know how do you turn a corner after that. We saw the Lions with Campbell. We saw him. He had some tough times, but you could always see the team improving. You could see the mentality of the players. They were all bought in and they were executing. They just didn't have the talent. And then they started to stockpile talent. What do you, as a former player too, what do you see out there with these guys? Like, at what point do they stop buying it and do they start being detractors or do they start getting away from it? I know he hasn't lost the locker room yet, but where do you get to as a player from mindset when you work that hard and you see these results?
Well, you get sick of losing. I mean, you just get, I know they were in the playoffs 2 years ago. I mean, you get sick of losing. They won their last 4, 2 years ago to get to the playoffs. So it's not that far removed. But, for a guy like Devontae Adams, who all he did was win in Green Bay, go to the playoffs every year, like this is hard to take. And, I mean, I know they made a concerted effort to start the game to get him the ball. But, honestly, how many 4-yard catches are going to get a receiver excited?
Right.
You're calling his number, but you're gaining 4 yards. I mean, it just looks bad. But, the roster looks very incomplete. At least in Detroit, you could see an improved roster. Mm-hmm. They went and got Jared Goff, and people thought, oh, he's a stopgap quarterback, except that he lines up every single Sunday. He never loses the game for you. He keeps you in games, and now they're winning games. So you'll see that this week firsthand. But it was they've made great picks. I mean, Brian Branch, Aiden Hudson. You just go through the list. Penei Sewell. Mm-hmm. They've made good, smart picks. They got a good young core on that team, and so that's you have to develop your young players. You just do. And can you say right now? What young player? Dylan Parham. Okay, I like Dylan. But like, how many young players have they drafted in the last couple of years where you're saying, okay, this is the future. This is what we're building around right now. And I don't know that you can, maybe Tyree Wilson will become a Pro Bowl player. Who knows? I'm not writing them off by any stretch. He got a sack last week. In a 2-minute, in a final play of the half, whatever. But regardless, I mean, I don't see a young core. Like, I was at the Jets today, and I can see Breece Hall and Garrett, Wilson, and I can see Sauce, and I see good young players that they're building around and got Aaron Rodgers and excited. I can't say that about the Raiders right now.
Yeah, and Baldy, it brings up a good point though about that young core, and obviously they had, and we talked about this the last time you were on. The Raiders had disastrous drafts the last 5 years. They had so much capital, and it just didn't pan out. Except for, Max Crosby's the one guy that sticks out the most. Of course, Josh Jacobs had a great year last year, not doing so great this year. But you look at that, you look at the lack of young talent, and you always say it when I watch your content. You always say, "Hey, look, in the NFL." You got to win in the trenches. You got to win up front on the offense. You got to win up front on the defense, and you got to have quarterback play.
Yep.
And the Raiders, they have okay offensive line play at times. Defensive line, Max Crosby, you mentioned Tyree Wilson, who knows, but it's not overly impressive. And like you said, there's not a lot of guys that you say, wow, this is a kid they're going to hold on to for a while because he's really lighting it up. But then you have the quarterback. And the Raiders have a rookie quarterback. I'm not saying Aiden O'Connell is going to be the answer long term. We don't know what he is. He's a fourth-round draft pick. He's limited. He's not a mobile guy. Mm-hmm. So when you look at that, though, at what point then do you say, if you're in Josh McDaniel's shoes, which I know is hard to do because so much of what he does, people seem to think is odd. What do you do? It's a quarterback league, Baldy. You have to be able to have good quarterback play to compete. Devontae Adams. 4-yard catches aren't going to do anything. You need to go vertical with him. You need to open up the field, and they're not able to do it with Garoppolo when he's healthy, or obviously with Brian Hoyer.
You got to get the quarterback. You just have to get it. There's teams that had just, continued to strike out with quarterbacks, just continually. The Saints from Archie Manning on struck out with quarterbacks until they signed Drew Brees. And then they fixed it, and then they got a coach, and then they built it, and then they had a lot of success and won a Super Bowl. But you go through the list, the Eagles thought they had it with Carson Wentz, and they didn't. But, they 53 or third pick in the draft in the second round, they took Jalen Hurts. He's got everything it takes to be as good as he wants. And he leads the entire team. They got that position figured out. And that's why they went from 4-11-1 to being a Super Bowl contending team. And they can just dismantle the Dolphins last week because they have a real philosophy. Okay, we're going to keep taking quarterbacks till we get it right. They had Donovan for a decade. It was good. It was a good run. They thought they had Carson and it just fell apart. But they got Jalen. And now you go, we're just going to keep the trenches big, thick, strong, and deep. And, and then look, if we're in a playoff hunt, we'll go get Kevin Byard. We don't care. We're just going to keep bringing them in. But we've got a foundation where you could take those kind of guys. The Raiders don't have that foundation right now. They just don't. And you have to mine those players. You have to develop those players. If you can find one in free agency on the way up, you go and get him, like Hassan Reddick. They went and got him in free agency. He's an elite player. He bounced around in Arizona and Carolina, but he's an elite player. They targeted him and they got him. And so how you build your team is really important.
It is. And I think that this situation with the Raiders, I think that's what's been so troubling for those of us who cover it from an objective standpoint, right? Which is, boy, at this time you would expect to see improvement, and instead you see sort of falling backwards. You might take a step forward, a little step, you win a close game, ugly, whatever it is, and then you play the Bears and this happens. So I think people are frustrated with that, and I understand it. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with this roster, because trade deadline's coming up. There was a lot of talk about Davante Adams. Of course, there's been no truth from that coming from the organization that we know of yet. And of course, the contract is massive at this point too. So we'll see. But Hunter Renfrow, you brought him up earlier. A lot of the report came out today from Jordan Schultz, who talked about how him and Josh McDaniels just didn't get along. And so they've been trying to trade him since last year. Look, I understand the personal dynamics with coaches, players. It happens sometimes. Guys don't get along. But I've seen the greatest athletes kind of put that aside, and coaches, no matter how big the egos, put that aside and go out and win together or go out and play together. When you look at that situation with Hunter Renfrow, he could be a massive tool for this team to work well with the quarterbacks that they do have. And he's just sitting there on the sideline, and then you kill his trade value because you don't play him. He's got no numbers, and he's coming off an injury last year. Is it common for that to happen and we just don't see it as much?
I don't know. They seem to be, this is, I'm sure it's been talked ad nauseum, but you fell in love with the Patriot way, and Jacoby Myers is here, and both quarterbacks are here, and they know the system and all that. It's like sometimes you have to divorce yourself of that stuff.
Yeah,
you just have to build your own template, and what worked in one place doesn't always work in the other place. Free agency is not the designated hitter. Like, you just can't just go plug your guy in the lineup and he's just going to go hit home runs for you. And so, they seem like odd fits. And they haven't gotten the quarterback situation figured out. I mean, if you didn't love Derek Carr, that's fine. He wasn't good in the post. He got to the postseason. Derek Carr is, he's a nice player. That's not the guy that's going to win in January, year in, year out for you. He just hasn't done it. Now, maybe you could go find Matt Stafford. And look, the Rams found Matt Stafford. The guy's an elite talent. Elite. There was a reason why he was the first pick in the draft. And Sean McVay saw it, and he gave up on Jared Goff, who was the first pick. But it's worked out for both teams. But both teams have their quarterback. So you got to have to – because really what you do is you get your quarterback, you establish your quarterback, and then you never stop building around that quarterback. The Eagles just brought in Julio Jones. I don't know if Julio is going to help the Eagles or not. But I'm here in Philly, so I hear all this. But, they got their quarterback. Offensive line, stout, big, strong. They keep developing guys. They drafted a guy in the second round this year. He'll be in the lineup by next year. All this stuff. But the quarterback said, okay, we'll go get DeAndre Swift. We'll get better running backs that can catch the ball. We'll make sure we go trade for A.J. Brown. We'll get an elite X receiver that's young and he's got fresh legs. So that's where they're wrong. That's where they're going wrong. You just can't find these stopgap quarterbacks and just go with injury histories and go, that's what we're going to build around. That's not a good plan.
No, and I know we got to let you go here, but I will tell you that the one thing you just said, and Mo and I have been talking about on the show since the game on Sunday, which is you could tell a lot about how a team's going to go by how the organization is running. You talk about Howie Roseman, what he's done with the Eagles. It's remarkable. I got to go get a piece. I'll go get a piece because we're there and we can compete for a championship. So we're going to go get it. We're going to develop. And I think that's what's missing here. And they're a serious organization. Serious. They're serious about winning. And I think if you're serious about winning, that's what you do. You build it your way. You build it with the people that you need and you trust. And then you go about it with good talent and let people do their jobs. And so we'll see if the Raiders can somehow figure that out and right the ship. But I think, to your point, there's some talent issues there, and there's some obviously development issues there. So we'll have to see. And it starts with quarterback as well as the trenches, as we talked about. Baldy, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you again soon.
I will talk to you. I will just say this one thing.
Yes.
Like if I was Max Crosby and I was Patrick Graham and I got beat soundly by a quarterback from Shepherd College in his first start, I wouldn't sleep at night. I would not sleep at night. Like there's no way you build your defense saying that guy is not going to beat us. And he helped beat you last week. And that, if you're Marcus Epps, I don't care, you're Marcus Peters, like you can't let Tyson Bagent in his first start play that error free. You just can't. Like it's you have to. I came from Philadelphia where Reggie White and Seth, like you welcome that quarterback to the league and you let him know what the league is all about. And they never did that.
No, and you mentioned Max Crosby. You know he's that way. But when you're the only guy and you don't have anybody there with you that maybe breathes and sleeps football like you do, that's where you have a problem. Baldy, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
All right. There you go. Brian Baldinger joining us here on Silver and Black today. We certainly appreciate him being with us. Great conversation always, and just great insight. And Mo and I are going to break down a little bit of what he said next as we come back for the second segment here. But some telling stuff there, some things that I've said. You guys got on me when I said this roster didn't have enough talent. Oh, they're doing all right. No, they don't have a lot to build on. And that's part of the problem. And that's development. That's on the organization. So we'll talk about that. All right. Take a quick break here. And when we come back, Mo will join me and we'll get continuing on with this edition of Silver and Black today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Silver and Black today. We appreciate you guys being with us. We're an Odyssey original podcast covering the Raiders. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your audio. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe there too. Hit the notifications bell and you can join in anytime we're live or anytime we premiere a new video. So thank you for that. Also want to thank Baldy again for stopping by in the first segment. And now Moe Moton, my co-host, joins us in. And I also want to make sure I give a clear plug for Baldy's podcast here on the Odyssey Network, which is called The Best Football Show with Brian Baldinger. And it's a great show because he goes around the league, he talks about everything and breaks things down. So I highly recommend that right after you subscribe to Silver and Black today, you go over and subscribe to Baldy's podcast. You got to do that. But a great conversation. I'm glad he stopped by. Mo, I know you heard a little bit about what he said. And I think the thing that struck me, the point, I mean, he made a lot of points and we'll get into some of them. But I think the one point that the way he said it, I guess I hadn't thought about it this way. And so when he said it, it sort of just clicked for me. He said, hey, so, I look around the league. He said, I was just at the Jets today for 5 hours hanging out with the Jets and seeing what they're doing. And I look at the Jets and I see all this young talent. I see Breece Hall. I see Sauce Gardner. Yes, he's injured, but I see all these young developing players. And then he's like, on the Raiders, who do the Raiders have? They have Max Crosby, Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams. But what about past that? Like, he's like, I don't see any kind of stockpiling of talent there. And then, of course, he talked about the Eagles, which it's a great textbook example of Howie Roseman, what he's done there to build that squad. And that kind of hit me. I was like, whoa, I've thought of or said something about that, but not in that way. And it goes back to some of the things we were talking about on Tuesday. And the reaction to the show Tuesday, by the way, Mo, was very funny. People, oh, you guys are so fired up and da, da, da. So, the 10% of people didn't like it, of course, but we got a lot of great feedback on it. It's just because it's becoming clear that certain things aren't working. But that point that Baldy made, and it's a hard reality for fans out there that listen to the Raiders or follow the Raiders, is that you kind of look at the roster and you're like, meh, right? Obviously they're not very good because they're not winning ball games, but you look at it for the future and it's a little discouraging.
It's a little discouraging now. Now, I will say that I think Tyree Wilson's made minimal strides. I tweeted during the game, during that Bears beatdown, I said the one kernel of positivity is I felt like even before the PFF grades came out, the eye test, Tyree Wilson had his best game against the Bears, but no one cares because the Raiders got blown off the field.
Yeah.
So I think that was lost in the shuffle a bit. But I've said this before, and I'll say it now. If Josh McDaniels were to get fired, I would fire Dave Ziegler with him. Because I've said it on my Bleacher Report Live. What rookie has Dave Ziegler drafted that you can look at and say, that guy is going to be a potential Pro Bowler or even a solid contributor for a decade, 5 years, or that player is going to get a second contract for sure.
Right.
You can't point to one single player, and he's actually traded or the team has not even rostered some of the players that he's drafted in his 2 classes. Matthew Butler didn't even make the 50-man roster this year, and he traded Neil Farrell Jr., 2 of the defensive tackles they drafted last year. Ja'Cory Bennett, I liked him. I had a lot of buzz in the preseason. Can't stay healthy right now, but when he was on the field, didn't show enough. Didn't show a lot. And Byron Young, hasn't been able to get on the field on a consistent basis. So the list goes on and on. So I agree with Baldy, but I've always made the point that Dave Ziegler hasn't done enough where I could say he deserves to keep his job, because he really hasn't as of right now. Now, give him some time, because sometimes picks take 3 years. We understand that. Look at Trayvon Merrick this year, his 3rd year. I get that. But if we're taking a snapshot right now, the returns don't look very good.
No, but it's interesting because, well, I agree with you 100%. And I'm the first one, and we talked about it, I think, on the last show, where I said Bryce Young. People give up on Bryce Young already. All these young quarterbacks, it's like, hey, you give them a year, and it's like, if they don't make it in the year, they're a bust, right? But I will say this. If you look at all the other teams and their draft picks, not all of them, but the teams that end up being competitive, it seems like, out of a draft class, they have a few guys that hit. I mean, you look at Raider fans aren't going to want to hear this. You look at the Chiefs last year. How many rookies started in the Super Bowl? 6, right? 6 rookies started in the Super Bowl. So there is a better way to do things. And to your point about Dave Ziegler, it's a good point. And we talked about, Baldy and I, the idea of this, the winning in the trenches, right? So you went into the season, and that's where you have to look at the Raiders too and say, well, wait a minute. You went into the season thinking you're good. You're good up front on both sides of the ball, right? And to me, I know we get hyper fixated on Josh Jacobs and the quarterbacks and Devontae Adams and the tight ends and lack of use, all that stuff. But up front, you're like, okay, Colton Miller, okay player, great, good player. But outside of that, everybody's replaceable. There's nobody on that offensive line that I'd be like going to bat for to say, no, we can't let this kid go. He's going to be a superstar. And on the defensive side, outside of Max Crosby, and you talked about Tyree Wilson, it's like, okay, you get some good play out of those guys, and that's fine. And this is where I had a listener of ours disagree with me on X.com last week, because they're like, you keep saying on your show that the Raiders defense is deficient in talent. I don't think that's true. And I'm like, what are you watching? And respectfully had a conversation with this person, which was good. But it's you look at this and you say to yourself, that's why we picked them originally to have 6 or 7 wins, because they just don't have that much talent. And it's showing out now. Add in the coaching situation, add in the fact that you can't develop talent. And it could be a really long rest of the season, Mo, if they can't start to get some performance out of these guys.
What I will say is the defense is exceeding expectations. Now, is there a lot of star level there? No. I mean, Max Crosby is the star on that unit, obviously, right?
No question.
Then you have Trayvon Merrick, who I think is back on the right track. Devon Diablo, let's hope he's healthy. Came up the field with an ankle injury against the Bears. I think he'd be a solid starter. Robert Spillane has exceeded expectations, but other than Max Crosby, right? What player do you look at and you say, I could put that player on the trade block and get a lot of value for that player? Because the league will tell you what your value is.
That's correct.
And I don't think there's anyone on that Raiders roster outside of Max Crosby that would get you great trade capital in a deal if the Raiders would have put that player on the trade block. Like I said, the closest thing behind Max Crosby, maybe I would say the next guy would probably be Merrick, because you could see the potential there. Devon Diablo plays a devalued position at linebacker. People, teams don't trade a lot for linebackers. So other than that, where's the value in that defense? There's still, don't get me wrong, I don't want people to hear me wrong on this. It is a good sign that they're making strides, and you want to see those young guys continue to make strides. So I'm not going to judge it too harshly. So I will say the defense has helped the Raiders win more games than the offense has. And that's an embarrassment, because, as I said, $104 million offense, 3rd fewest points scored per game this year.
But even the defense, and I agree with you on the defense. I mean, we've been saying it on the show for the last 3 weeks, right? Or now almost 4 weeks. But it's sort of like, it reminds me of a story. Let me take you back in time, Mo, to when I was in high school, and I was not good in math, and so I get into my second year, or my first year. It was calculus. I can't do it, man. I'm just like, I don't know, other side of the brain, whatever. And I was struggling and I was failing. And so remember the parent teacher conference, and the parent teacher conference was, okay, well, listen, we want Scott to pass the class. We got to get him to work hard. We understand it's not his thing, but we need him to get him past the class. So the expectation was I wouldn't get an F, that maybe I'd get if I was really lucky, a C minus, right? And so when we talk about they're exceeding expectations, yeah, it's sort of easy to do that in some ways, Mo, because they've been terrible for so long. And so when you see some improvement, it definitely is welcomed and it's a good sign. But then the question becomes, 3 or 4 weeks from now, how much have they improved now? And if they just are inching along, it's not enough, because it's the NFL. And guess what? You can't look, you got people coming in the league, coaching teams that the previous year won 4 games. And I mean, look at what the Eagles did, right? You have turnarounds that happen quick. Turnarounds in the NFL are expected in 1 to 2 years, not 3 to 5 anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I agree there. What I will say, though, is you have a second half of the season. And
True.
what I want to say about that is that I would wait to kind of assess the young players, specifically on the defense, until the season's over. Because you're talking about, for guys like Tyree Wilson, a handful of games where it looked like he knew what was going on around him. You talk about Byron Young, who hasn't been, as I said, hasn't been on the field yet. You talk about Jacorian Bennett, who has to get healthy. So Aiden O'Connell, we'll see if he ever gets a start again. But he has showed some bright spots that he could be a backup. So what I will say is, yes, you're right. They're not given enough. They're not getting enough contributions out of their rookie class. But I'm willing to see what it looks like after 1 year.
Yeah, and that's understood. That's why I said 4 or 5 more weeks with this defense to see what happens. The offense is a different story because you got a lot of veterans over there. But that in itself is interesting. The other thing he talked about, and he brought it up. Do you remember? I think the 2 out of the last 3 appearances that Baldy had on our show, Mr. Moton, he talked about Patriot way doesn't work outside of New England. Right? He said it again today. He said, look, it's like, you got to go be your own person. You got to be your own. You got to run things the way you got to run them where you're at. Like, that stuff doesn't work. You can't, it's not like it's a boxed magic pill that you go and, oh, I'm in the desert now, let me take this pill and, hey, we're Bill Belichick and the Patriots. It doesn't work that way. And it is a copycat league, though. You look at offenses, defense. That's why the scoring is down in the NFL for the 3rd straight year. And I think that's because everybody keeps copying everybody. And eventually people catch on because everybody's running the same stuff and defenses start to realize what's going on. But this whole idea that, I forgot who it was that wrote it, but the idea that Josh McDaniels looks like he's coaching scared. It looks like they're trying to outsmart everybody with these picks that don't necessarily resound, or no, they know talent well enough and they're going to go get all these Patriots who, from your rant on Tuesday, our system fits, right? All this stuff. And it just over and over again shows that it's not working. So that's what I want to see in the second half of the season, Mose. I want to see these leaders, if they are leaders, step up and say, you know what? We just got to do what we got to do. What do we got to do with this team to get the most out of them this year? And then set us up for success in the future. I know people out there saying there is no success with Josh McDaniels. I get it. But there's got to be something done. You have to see some movement. You have to see some sense of urgency that they realize this thing's off the track.
If Mark Davis doesn't have a comment, let's say the Raiders go to Detroit Monday Night Football and it's a bad loss. If Mark Davis is silent after that, 2 embarrassing losses back to back, then why would the players have any urgency if there's no urgency from the top? If there's no if the person at the top of the food chain who hired the head coaching, who hired the front office and coaching staff, or the head coach, is not showing any urgency, And the last time we were in a similar situation, he said Josh McDaniels is doing a fantastic job. Why should the players look at this as, oh, we have to have some urgency when you can kind of see that the status quo is okay for now? Now, reports came out that Josh McDaniels has been coaching for his job, but those are just reports secondhand. Mark Davis hasn't said anything publicly about the football team. And again, I'm not saying that Mark Davis has to come out and throw Josh McDaniels or Dave Ziegler or anyone under the bus. Mm-hmm. But if you can just come out and just say, hey, this is unacceptable, something to let the players know the person at the top of the food chain is paying attention to what's going on and seeing that it's not working, then I think you would get more out of the players. But if the person at the top is like, meh, fantastic, this is part of the plan, then the player's like, oh, okay, I guess this is part of the plan. We get our butts kicked back-to-back weeks, and we look ahead to 2024.
Yeah. And it's a good point, because I do believe that, and the times I've met Mark Davis always come across as an affable guy. Of course, I don't know him well. There are reporters who talk to him a lot, and so they've probably already talked to him, and maybe their silence speaks volumes. And that you could read that either way. But I do believe that everybody, especially owners of businesses, they have pride and they have ego. Doesn't matter who you are, you have ego. Everybody's got ego. So to your point, if Monday night is a bloodbath, then I would expect something to happen. And I don't say he's getting fired. I'm just saying Mark Davis to say something, or at least people to request that he say something, because, whoa, what's going on here? If they don't get blown out and they play well, for example, but still lose, okay, then you're making progress, right? It's a tough game anyway. But I just don't understand, sort of that silence piece of it is interesting. And we'll have to see what happens going forward, because I think the next few weeks are pivotal. I've been saying that for the other reasons, saying, well, they could be positive because you could win these ball games. But now I'm saying they're pivotal because you've got to show, and they've got to show each other, Mo, that they're capable of pulling out of whatever they're in, because they went to Chicago, and no matter what Josh McDaniels said, they weren't prepared. Or if they were prepared, they were just flat and came out and whatever. And that's a motivational issue, and that has to be in the coach too. So it's a mess of a thing. But as I said, and nobody wanted to hear it, every Sunday is a different game. And you never know what can happen in the NFL.
Did you hear what Cole Kmet, the tight end of the Chicago Bears, said about the Raiders on last Sunday? He basically said the Raiders played like they were jet lagged. He basically said, we ran the ball, and anytime we got a big gain of 6 yards on the ground, you could just tell the Raiders were ready to tap out. That's what he said. I'm not reporting this. This is not a rumor. You can go online right now on Twitter. I think it's already made off of 33rd front office.
Oh, yeah.
33rd team. He posted the clip. And it was Cole Kmet, the tight end of the Bears, and it was Aquan St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother, who plays for the Bears. They were talking about the Raiders' energy level on Sunday, and he said they played like they were jet lagged. Now, I understand the Raiders are going from the west to the east, or Midwest in Chicago, East Coast time zone, but I believe they traveled ahead. They arrived in Chicago early to get ahead of that. And for them to come out with a lack of energy against a bad football team, it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes.
It does. It does. Crazy. All right. We're going to wrap up this segment of Silver and Black today. We'll get back for our final segment. We'll talk a little bit about Monday's game and maybe even a prediction or two. And we'll see what's going on there. But you are listening to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Mo and Scott. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Silver and Black today, segment number 3, the home stretch here on this show. The last time we'll talk to you before the Raiders play Monday Night Football against the Detroit Lions. And we appreciate you guys subscribing to the show wherever you get your audio. Also on YouTube, thank you for hitting that subscribe and the notifications bell. Moe Moton is my co-host. He is the senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report. You can catch him on the X at Moe, Moemoton. Also catch his Raiders work, where he's a columnist up at Sportsnot, where I also am a writer and editor. So check out Sportsnot. If you haven't been there, do it. And then, of course, Mo has his Bleacher Report lives. Do you have one? You have one obviously before and after the game Monday, right?
Monday night,
this-
I'll be on
Monday
before
night?
and after the game. Yep. Next one will be
There you
Monday
go.
night. 6:45
Okay,
Eastern time, 2:45 Pacific, then right after the game.
Yep. So there you go. You can get instant reaction from Mo on the Bleacher Report app, where he might be Mad Mo, Maniac Mo, Midtown Maniac Mo, whatever you want to call him.
Can I say something about that really quick?
Yes.
People are enjoying the hashtag Mad Mo version of me, but I just want to say, like, this is the authentic me here. I know a lot of people like to do rants to go viral. I see a lot of radio hosts do that, and a lot of people know, if you've been listening to the show, I don't do viral rants. That's not my thing. However I'm feeling when I get up Monday morning to record the show with you, Scott, that's what you get. Regardless of what happens, there's no pre-plan. I'm going to say this. It's my raw reaction to the game before I dive deep into the film and watch some things over and watch certain players. You're getting the authentic version of me. And some people like it, some people don't, and that's fine. And some people say I can't listen to all the negativity, and I will say that if you're watching the game, you could tell things are not good right now. So I'm not going to sit here and paint the pretty picture with rainbows and unicorns and pretty flowers and crap like that and tell you it's going to be okay and give you a lollipop. I'm going to tell you exactly what you should be seeing, or what we all saw when we watched these football games.
Right. And that's what was interesting about the reaction, because I took it as a huge compliment, frankly, Mo, because we stay even keeled. We stay objective, right? And so when we go into when we had the shows this past week, and including the post-game show, people are like, and some people are like, well, you're just doing it for clicks and subscriptions and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, it's a free subscription, so it's like whatever. But we're not doing it for click, because if we were, we'd be doing it all the time. We would be that way all the time, and we're not. But and also, I said to somebody too, one of the PSL holders, who's a listener, a longtime listener of ours, who texts with me almost every day, and he's like, I'm so tired of this. Like I'm just, and that's why I feel bad. I feel bad for fans too. Like people are like, stop talking about fans on your show. Just talk about football. It's like, well, no, the fans are part of football and they feel it. And so we talk about it because that's who's listening to us. But I will say this, the Raiders have an opportunity now to go on the road and do something special, Mo. Playing the Lions on Monday night. And we pose the question right now, and I'm asking you this straight up, my friend. How bad could this be?
I don't think it could be any worse than what happened with the Bears, simply because people aren't expecting the Raiders to compete with the Lions. Mm-hmm. Right? So the Lions got blown out last week by the Baltimore Ravens. Everyone's expecting the Lions to come out angry. It's their first home Monday Night Football game since 2018. Wow. I don't know if you remember that game. That was the game they played the Jets, and Sam Darnold threw an interception on his first career pass. That was the last time the Lions won Monday Night Football. So their crowd is going to be rocking. They're going to be charged up. If you look at the predictions across the board, no one is expecting the Raiders to do anything. Mm-hmm. Typically, a person who's watched the Raiders in recent past, these are usually games where the Raiders surprise you, and they actually compete, and they actually look like they can beat a team that's a playoff contender. So I'm not going to write off the Raiders and say they're going to get crushed, because I've seen this movie before. Raiders come out flat against a team they should beat, and then they bounce back and may not win the game, but they look competitive against a playoff caliber team, and you're left wondering, okay, so which version of this team is going to show up week to week? Good question. That's what Raiders fans have been accustomed to, because that's what I've been accustomed to when I watch these Raider games. Whether they're bad or good, this is what usually happens. They lay an egg, and then they come out and they're competitive, and you're like, okay, so which is it? Who are these Raiders? And I think the game on Monday Night Football is gonna dictate how the Raiders approach the final hours of the trade deadline, because the trade deadline is the next day on Halloween. So if the Raiders lay an egg, the Raiders may decide we're going to sell a lot more than we expected to. If the Raiders win or look competitive, they may hold a lot of their core together for the rest of the season.
So two questions there for you though. Okay, so I understand what you're saying about unexpected, like because like you look at the offense, you say there's talent there. There's talent there. Okay. Except for the guy that you just froze out, and because apparently you don't like him, so you just want to trade him. But other than that, like, okay, I get it. But then I go back to evidence. Evidence. Like, what have I seen in the last 4 games that makes me believe that they can score points, especially against the defense that is number 2 in the NFL against the run. So there goes maybe trying to establish the run game. Now maybe they come out and do, and it's a shocker. I mean, NFL has those all the time, usually one a week. So I hear what you're saying. I'm just not a believer that it's going to happen, but that's why they played the game. Go ahead.
I'm just saying it would not shock me if nothing. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, nothing in the NFL does, right? Because look what happened to Detroit. Now Baltimore's a really good team, but nobody thought they'd get blown out. You thought that was going to be a nice close game at least. The second part of your point about the trade deadline. How do I say this? Mo, what the hell do they have to trade? Outside of Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs value is low. Now somebody might want him because they got to have a running back. But who else?
I have a comment about Josh Jacobs. Now, before the Colts gave Jonathan Taylor a new contract, the Packers were interested in Jonathan Taylor, a former rushing title champion. Now, this is after Jonathan Taylor had a down year. He was hurt. They were still interested in him. If there's any team out there that would trade for Josh Jacobs and possibly give up a 2nd or 3rd round pick, it would be the Packers. I'll say that. The other thing is,
they're not going anywhere.
They want to help their young quarterback Jordan Love, and I think they want to be. I think they want to be a run first team. And just imagine if you had Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs in your backfield, that's easily the best running back duo in the NFL. You could turn things around very quickly, especially in the NFC North when you have the Lions and it's just the Vikings are 3 and 4, they're the second best team in that division, right? So the other thing about what do the Raiders have to trade, I'm going to say this for the 50th time, right? If the Raiders want to trade Hunter Renfrow, Jermaine Illuminar, Jerry Tillery, they're going to have to package those guys with draft picks. I don't know if you remember when they traded Lynn Bowden Jr. to the Dolphins. What did they do? I know they got back Raekwon McMillan. But they packaged him with a draft pick. Anytime a player you want to trade doesn't have a lot of trade value on the market, you're going to have to package him to move him with a draft pick. So I think any move that happens with any other Raiders outside of Devontae Adams and Max Crosby, which I don't see happening, other than maybe Josh Jacobs, you're going to have to trade that player and a draft pick. And with Hunter Renfro's situation, you're probably also going to have to eat part of his salary because the Raiders foolishly held him on their roster after they signed Jacoby Myers. They signed Jacoby Myers on March 14th. Hunter Renfro's contract locked in the full guarantees on March 17th. So the Raiders knowing they were interested in Jacoby Myers, held on to Hunter Renfro, then added DeAndre Carr and took away his punt return duties, then drafted a slot wide receiver in the 3rd round. And now they're like, we want to trade Hunter Renfro. He has no value. You don't give him any targets. You don't give him any time on the field, any significant time on the field. He has a fully guaranteed contract now. He was hurt last year and wasn't productive. What are you going to get for Hunter Renfro now? Probably a 6th round pick if you trade him straight up. That's why I said you're going to have to package him with a draft pick now if you want maybe a 4th or 3rd round draft choice next year.
Yeah. And that's where the whole talk the last couple of weeks about the Raiders being buyers. Well, we'll see what they're buying because they need draft capital for sure. But like you said, there's nobody on the roster that they would be willing to part with at this point that would bring high draft picks, right? So that's how it's going to go. And nobody's trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, folks. So don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So that's where it's at now. The thing about this situation too, and we have it up on the graphic on the screen, which is the only thing we know is that we don't know anything. Like I don't know. This team is really in that purgatory stage. Like they're not so bad that they're the Carolina Panthers, and they're not good enough to where like give you enough hope to think that they could actually make a push for the playoffs. But I don't see. I see the trajectory. I see an up and down, very big swings of hey, play one game well. Maybe in a position to win, and maybe you do, or maybe you don't. And then you see what we saw in Chicago. The embarrassing thing about the Chicago situation is that the Raiders truly, it shocked me because I mean, I knew how shocking the upset was, but is how much they are now a meme and the butt of a joke in the NFL. At sitting at 3-4, like you're like, wait a minute, you have these 1-5 teams, all these other teams, but the Raiders are the ones getting all of the jokes because of the slew of stats that you rolled off last show about McDaniels and the coaching. So when you look at 2023, we don't know what's going to happen yet, Mo, but I think that the next few weeks, how they respond to what happened in Chicago, to the comments you talked about from Cole Kmet, that the team was gassed and not ready to play, all that stuff. Then how do they respond to it? And I think the next few weeks, especially on a tough game like this, is going to show you sort of what this team is made of.
I hope this doesn't happen. So I'm going to preface what I'm going to say by saying, I hope this does not happen. But if the Raiders lose St. Louis Rams style, and I tweeted this because someone asked me, what would it take for Mark Davis to come out and fire Josh McDaniels at the end of the season or before the season ends? And I told that person on X that if the Raiders lose like 52-0, if you remember that Rams lost to the then St. Louis Rams,
yeah, that
was in St. Louis. It was 52-0. The Raiders got crushed. If it's that type of loss, I think Mark Davis has no choice but to say something. I also said that if it doesn't happen in Detroit and it happens at Allegiant Stadium when they get crushed like that, like 50-something-0, or a team puts up a 50 burger on them and they just look completely out of it, he has to respond to it because then it's in his face. He's there, present in his building. Team looks lifeless. Then you have to shake it up. But the problem, not the problem, the weird point is that they only have one more game until the trade deadline. So that's what I said. Right. A lot of this is going to be based on, okay, what do they look like in that game before the deadline? Does it look like a team that has some life? Because if they go out there in Detroit and lay down, you're going to see a lot of players in different uniforms for week 9.
Yeah, and I think you look at the schedule after Detroit, then you have 2 straight home games against the New York teams. Okay. You lose to the Giants. The Jets, Jets have a really, really good defense. So I can understand that. You lose to the Giants at home and the Jets, and then you have to go play in Miami, and then you have Kansas City before the bye. So in my view, you have to see at least some kind of 500 like football before the bye. If you have this, I mean, if you talked about losing at home, I mean, I don't think they lose to the New York Giants or the Jets 52-0. I mean, those teams I don't think could even score 30 points. But if it continues to slide, which it might not, I mean, they might go to the Lions, lose the Lions, they might come home and win 2 in a row. I mean, that's what mediocre teams do usually. And so we'll see. And then the Dolphins and Chiefs 2 weeks in a row is a tough road. So I don't know. I think you're right though, that he's going to have to say something if things get worse. I don't think they'll get that bad. Maybe I'm wrong. I keep saying that. And then of course they go to Chicago. You go to Chicago, right? So, you got to laugh. It's like, well, okay, so much for my opinion. But anyway, so we'll see. And the next few weeks, again, the next 3 weeks are big and we'll see what happens with them and if they're able to in any way turn it around. Mo, what's your prediction for the game against the Lions?
I hate to say it because people are going to be like, Mo, you're a hater, but 35-19, 35-17. I think the Lions are just a better football team. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it and try to feed you, lollipops here. The Lions are better. I know what people are saying after they got blown out by the Ravens. Are they frauds? They're not frauds. When you face Lamar Jackson and you're not used to facing Lamar Jackson, you're gonna probably struggle. Now they're not used to facing the Raiders either, but the Raiders don't have a player like Lamar Jackson on offense, and we don't even know if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be ready for the game. As of today, this show airing, we don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback. So how can I have any kind of confidence that the Raiders are going to look competitive on offense? We don't know what Jimmy Garoppolo's status is. Brian Hoyer shouldn't even be touching the football field. And Josh McDaniels is afraid to start Aiden O'Connell, even though he traded.
He is afraid. He's
afraid. It doesn't.
What's he afraid of?
That's my question. Like, we've seen Brian Hoyer in the preseason, and Josh McDaniels got to the podium. Which strikes me as just weird is he said, "This is not the preseason." Well, the guy you picked to start didn't even look good in the preseason. He looked worse than the guy you drafted in the 4th round. It doesn't make it just.
Are they not watching? Are they not watching tape? I mean,
is he present on the sideline? You know,
every expert, NFL, because you and I, we're busy writing and doing videos, all this kind of stuff, podcasts, but we read stuff and watch stuff, right? Because we have to be informed. I'm watching all of the X's and O guys, you name them, from the smaller guys that we know that come on our show to Ted over at The Athletic to Dan Orlovsky to everybody. And they're like, this is the worst quarterback play I've ever seen. Like, they can't do anything. Brian Hoyer, even Baldy, as you heard in the first segment, Baldy's like, yeah, it's just not good quarterback play. He's not seeing the ball. He's not seeing anything. So you look at that and they're like, oh, so are they all wrong? And Josh McDaniels is right? No, it's not true. So I agree with you. I'm going to say it's going to be 38-10. I don't think the Raiders get the 13 points.
I gave it 35-17, simply because I think regardless of who starts, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Brian, if he makes the mistake and puts Brian Hoyer back out there again, we'll see a replay of last week where Aiden O'Connell comes in at garbage time and then, racks up some points late, some meaningless points.
Yeah.
And it's pretty sad because if Jimmy Garoppolo shouldn't play or isn't going to play because he's hurt,
yeah,
just start Aiden O'Connell. And if it looks bad, it looks bad. We understand it's a rookie. He's getting to start against a tough defense. We don't understand. But you're not learning anything by starting Brian Hoyer and then having him just kind of bottom out and then just bow out in the 4th quarter. And then you toss in Aiden O'Connell when the kid has to press and the team knows you're passing the football. It doesn't help Aiden O'Connell. It doesn't give him a good environment to grow when he's coming into the game. He's down by 3 scores already.
100% agree. And I think that they have to, if you want, the only way I think the Raiders score over 10 points, honestly, is if they put O'Connell in. Because I'm not saying O'Connell won't throw 2 interceptions too, and they still lose, but I think they could score 20 points or more with him throwing the ball. Although if they can't run the ball, that doesn't help them either.
Scott, do you realize what you just said? You're telling me that the Raiders have a better chance,
yes,
of getting over the 20-point mark with a rookie who has only 1 career start over the guy that the Raiders handpicked, or Josh McDaniels handpicked and paid bridge quarterback money to, and was a winner in San Francisco. The rookie has a better chance of giving the Raiders better scoring production. What is it? That's a problem. That's a problem within itself. That money, that means that money that you paid Jimmy G, you could have done so many other things with that money and then just roll with Aiden O'Connell for that.
Yes. And you could have, you could have done a lot of things. You could have drafted an inside defensive interior player first. You could have drafted an offensive lineman again. There are a lot of things they could have done. Now, that's easy for me to second guess, so I get it. But yes, I do think he would give them the best chance because Jimmy G has been awful. He's been the worst you said it last show, been the worst statistically in his career. So injury aside, so we'll have to see, but we'll know Monday night, man, and it'll be interesting. So, Mo, what do you got coming up as far as what people need to read with their eyeballs on their phones or their screens?
Over on Sportsnet, I made the case why the Raiders should be buyers and sellers, because I actually think they're going to do both. I actually think they're going to trade players, Hunter Renfrow, and they're going to acquire players for the future, not just because they want to win this year, but I think they're going to try to acquire young players for the years beyond the 2023 season. So I'll make the case that they should be doing both over on Sportsnet. And as I said, I will be on pregame against the Lions and postgame. So I'm going to take some days to kind of look over some things with the Raiders, pay attention to the reports, because I am running the trade tracker at Bleacher Report. Any trade that goes down, I will have instant analysis and my grade for each team that's involved in the trade over on Bleacher Report. So if that Hunter Renfrow trade goes down, be sure to check that out over on BR.
There you go. I will have a piece on Sportsnet about how the Raiders need to bring a special guest to Raiders headquarters to release the curse that is apparently on this team. They have to bring in Jamarcus Russell
Oh my gosh.
and exorcise the demons. I'm kidding. I'm not writing that.
I was hoping.
But something's going on. They got to get. I mean, the Cubs had the Billy Goat, all that jazz. Raiders got something. They got to figure it out. But anyway, I appreciate you, Mo, and appreciate all the work you're doing. By the way, we will be back tomorrow with a mailbag show. We got some good voicemails and some emails. So you guys make sure you tune into that before you hit your weekend. And we'll be right back here. Obviously, we'll have a post-game reaction show late Monday night. And then we'll have, because of the late Monday night, we will not have a regular show Tuesday. That'll be the show for Tuesday. And then I think we'll do a Wednesday show. So we'll record that at some point and get it to you Wednesday. So we'll figure that out. So next week will be a little weird because of that. We're going to have a shorter week. So we got to figure it out. So Mo and I haven't talked about that yet, but we will. We'll get you the content. Trust me. We'll be there. It'll be good.
I just hope the Rays are good enough on Monday where Murph doesn't have to do a show with a bag on his head. That was so sad to see. I'm seeing more paper bag Raider fans out there.
Yeah.
It's on their memes, their
Yeah.
Twitter profiles, their X profiles, whatever you want to call it. I'm seeing more paper bags. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, I did see, and I will not mention handle. I did see one Raiders fan talk about he might need a plastic grocery bag, and I was like, ooh,
I saw that too.
hard to breathe. All right, Mo, my man, I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Actually, we'll talk to you for tomorrow for the mailbag show. All right.
Yeah.
For our producer, Mike Robier, for Moe Moton, I am Scott Gulbransen. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your audio. We thank you all for being here. Hang in there. We're going to get through it together, and we're going to be here for you. I'm Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today. Take care.